In 2018, I had the pleasure of collaborating with 7 composers from several countries across Africa to commission 8 new solo works for the bassoon. This is an ongoing commissioning project, Bassoon Music from Africa, in which it is my goal, other than playing amazing music, to normalize the representation of contemporary African artists in the repertoire. Today, in this video, you will meet 3 composers who I worked with: Graciedion Bernard Oforka, Peter Nyabuto, and Njabulo Phungula. You'll also hear excerpts of their works for the bassoon. If you'd like to hear the complete works, the YouTube links are in this video, and also on YouTube you can hear the other pieces from this set, composed by Johnny Balonji, Job Ivan Tezigatwa, Mohamed Denke, and Godwin Sado. You can also get in touch with me at midorisamson.com/buy if you would like to add some of this sheet music to your own repertoire. I'd like to thank the Nagani Music Institute for making this possible and sponsoring commissioning fees. And now I'd like to introduce 3 composers: Graciedion Bernard Oforka, Peter Nyabuto, and Njabulo Phungula. Thank you for watching.
All right, Grace Bernard Oforka, also known as Graciedion. So I'm a singer and an African female composer, and also a vocal coach and a music therapist. Well, I studied music at the Federal College of Education, where I got the certificate to be a professional music teacher. And afterwards, I got to work with 10 Strings Music Institute as their vocal coach and music therapist, where I got to train a whole lot of special children, those with autism and those with Down syndrome. And then with more of experience, I began to compose. And the first song I composed was Kuzo Muyabeshi, that I composed officially, though by God's grace, it was published this year. That song is for the recorder, the soprano voice, and the violin, and the cello. So it was performed, it was premiered in 2016. In 2017, I had other compositions too. And then in 2018, I was blessed to be commissioned to compose Chegharia and Nkowa, one great composition that till today I can say it's God's handwork. And everything about it is so divine, because in that same 2018, the compositions that I was privileged to compose were born out of the way I felt. It was not just that I sat down and said I want to compose. No, it was at a period whereby I was in a shock, and the music just came out of my spirit. In that same 2018, I composed Chegharia, I composed Nkowa, and I composed an opera on the story of Job, which was also premiered in that 2018. Now, Chegharia and Nkowa is for the bassoon instruments. And actually, the first time I was commissioned to compose a song for the bassoon, I was like, I don't even know of a song in Africa that is that is like an African composer has composed for a bassoon. So it was like a wonderful challenge for me. I got to hear the sound of Midori, and I also got to hear other sounds from other composers, so from the Western world. But then there was a song that came to me in my ear when she first told me about it, because as at the time she called me, that period was really the time I wasn't talking to anybody. So when I saw her mail, I was like, okay, I got to one place and we talked, and she commissioned me to do the work, and I began to work on it. And to the glory of God, by the time the song was out, I myself was like, wow, this is wonderful. The first one, Chegharia, it talks about repent, have a rethink. Like I was like, when you lose somebody so close to you, you just begin to see life in a different aspect. You begin to um, think of, okay, what are the things I have not done that I'm supposed to have done? What are the things I could have done that you never can tell? He was a young man, and he left so quick. But in the space of those years he lived a very well fulfilled life that till today so many people talk about how well he lived his life. So I was like, I think the world needs to hear this. The world needs to, everybody has to always be conscious of themselves. They should always have a rethink. They should repent. If they are not doing things that is good, they should stop it and try to live a good life, because this life is once. You just have to live a good life. So then the second one was Nkowa. Nkowa actually, truth be told, Nkowa was inspired by Midori. It
Wow.
was inspired by Midori, yes. After I composed Chegharia, I was surprised that Chegharia could be composed after in that state that I was. And Nkowa means explanation. So during the time I was to compose Chehara, it took me a while because it was getting close to the day of the commission. And I kept telling her I would submit it soon, I would submit it soon. But I knew I was battling with my heart on expressing myself. So by the time I was done with Cheharia, right there, on the day I finished composing Cheharia, I got the inspiration to write Nkowa. I was like, okay, let me explain with her with this second song. Let me explain myself with this second song. I'm sure when she sees the second song, she'll be more impressed. And so it was immediately I finished Cheharia. That's why if you see the songs, they both rhyme together. By the time you play Cheharia, you want to play Nkowa together, because Nkowa is like, it's an explanation. Is you want to explain yourself, but you don't know the words. Words fail you to say what you want to say. So you just put them in music. So that's Nkowa. So I wrote Nkowa, and then it flowed with Cheharia through the song. And to the glory of God, each time I hear it being played on the bassoon, there's this feeling I have deep inside of me. It's like I hear the words coming out of the instrument. Bassoon is an instrument that you cannot easily see in Nigeria here, or I don't know about other parts in Africa. I only know of two bassoonists. One is a professional bassoonist, and the other one is a student in Nigeria here. So they are the only two people I know. Other than that, I've not seen any other person that plays the bassoon here. So when Midori performed premiered the first time she premiered it, she played those pieces. I was like, wow. It was like I got more inspiration on the song. I never even felt the inspiration as at the time I was creating it, as at the time I was composing it, because the time I was composing it, I was pouring out my heart. I was pouring out how I felt. And that's the way I always compose my songs. Most of my songs comes out from the way I feel at the moment. And so when Cheharia was being that was the way I felt. So by the time it was being played back, I could feel back. I could feel more. I was more inspired. The instrument, it was just like I could feel the words. I don't need to hear you say Cheharia when you are singing the song, but I can feel you are saying Cheharia as you're singing the song. So those songs have been beautiful gifts from God to us, beautiful pieces to the world. And I really admire all bassoonists and all those who have been playing this music. Wow. And please keep it up, and every other music. I listen to all the other music by other composers that were commissioned along with me, and it was wonderful. In short, every of the music, the pieces for the bassoon is wonderful. So that shows that actually the bassoon can produce sounds for the African voice. It can produce sounds for the African language. And I must encourage you, Midori, for starting off this revolution of having we African composers, we African composers expressing our voice, expressing our language in the music.
Wow.
God bless us all as we
Well,
listen.
I want no credit for this because this was all coming from you and my collaborators. So this was all thanks to the people behind this music and who wrote it, and who. It's so nice of all of you. It's so nice of you to let me like play this music and give life to it. And your two songs are such gifts to us, to all the bassoonists who are going to hear this call, and to everyone who will buy it. They're so special, and it means a lot that you let us into your world and let us tell these stories. The Chegharia is about your brother, right?
Yeah,
So it means so much that you invite us in to share the story of him and all the other music that's coming from your soul, like you said.
Thank you.
Thank
You
you.
so much. Thank you so much.
My name is Peter Nyabuto. I am an orchestral musician, but in this context, I play the bassoon. I'm based in Nairobi, Kenya, Africa. So I am a full-time musician. I did a degree in music, though it was not focused on the bassoon. Yeah, I started playing. I guess I can talk about when I started playing. Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Cool. So ideally, my principal instrument is a saxophone. Yeah. So I started playing in the National Youth Orchestra of Kenya on the saxophone. And then later on, someone donated a bassoon to the organization that runs the orchestra, the National Youth Orchestra of Kenya. And for the longest, not even for the longest time, I don't think there was any other Kenyan bassoonist before that. So the only bassoonists who are available to play in the orchestras in Kenya were visiting musicians or visiting teachers who are not primarily Kenyans. Yeah, so I took it up as a challenge, really. Yeah, a challenge
a
to at
challenge.
least Yeah, exactly. I took it up as a challenge to at least to have the bassoon parts in the orchestra being played by the actual bassoon, because before they were being played by the tenor sax, which I was playing. Yeah. And that's how I started pretty much. That's how I started pretty much. Of course, as everyone who's played the bassoon knows, the first couple of months it doesn't sound good. Let me just say it doesn't sound good. Then later on, bit by bit, I was lucky enough because at the time I started, the music director of the youth orchestra was a bassoonist. He's a bassoonist, I guess. Yeah. And he was based in Kenya at the time. He was working in Kenya. So I was very lucky to have a couple of lessons with him. And then later on when he moved, I continued a bit. And then another visiting musician from America is called David Richmond, whose wife works in Kenya, became now my teacher. So he comes in the country once. No, he's pretty much in the country a lot. And then he goes back and forth between Kenya and USA. Currently he's in the USA, but at least I've gotten to have a couple of lessons with him also. Yeah, so that's my bassoon journey, a summary of it, at least.
Cool. And what about your journey as a composer and how it relates to all of that?
Okay. So I've been context. It aches me. Let me start by saying it aches me that most of the music that the orchestras in Kenya play most of the music is not Kenyan music. It's not African music. It's not music that someone in primary school who are trying to get to play into a orchestra in Kenya can relate to. So they're talking about, I don't know, mountains in England and rivers in Austria and stuff like that. So it really bothers me that we can't play our own stories. So that's why I was trying. So initially I started by arranging music. So vocal music, pop music, arranging them for the local orchestras. And bit by bit, I started composing just slowly to try and see if I can get something that people can relate to. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, a big reason why I asked you to write a piece was that I do some work in Kenya and I do a lot of work in the US with children who are originally from Africa, like refugee children. And it was so important to me that if I was going to be in the room with them, I needed to be playing for them music by people who look like them and who come from the same traditions. And so I'm really happy that you brought that up, because now you, Peter Nyabuto, are that person for primary school students, just like you said.
Yeah. And that's in Nairobi we say, even though leaning is a box. That's what caught my attention, especially when you said we need to have music that's more localized, music that someone can relate to from where they come from. And that's really what motivated me to write that piece for Bassoon, the piece that you commissioned. Yeah. And I was really, really happy about that. At least someone who sort of has the same idea, the same goals as I sort of have. Yeah.
That makes me happy too. Why don't we talk about that piece that you wrote? It's really hard. Let's talk about challenge. That was a challenge for me to learn, but what a rewarding challenge. So tell us about Tafika Tu.
So Tafika Tu is, the title is a Swahili phrase, which basically translates to eventually we'll reach there. Ni Tafika Tu, or Tu Tafika Tu, eventually we will reach there. So the idea behind it was a piece to signify hope. So the journey from, is it called desperation? The journey from having no hope to having hope. And the way the piece is written, it's written in ideally what you call movements, but basically it's sections. There's 3 sections to it. So the first section is where it's a feeling of struggling, a feeling of yearning for more. Then the middle section is a bit slow, something as if the hope is coming. And then the final section is now, it's like a celebration, like you're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. Basically, that's the idea behind it. I don't know what to say about the difficulty of the piece, because I think I think the difficulty is more of the rhythmic aspect of it, because the inspiration for the piece is mostly from the coastal communities in Kenya. So I don't know if you know Mombasa and that area. There's a community called Mijikenda, and they usually have such beautiful music. Yeah. So there's this type of music called Sengenya, which is basically it's basically what they do when they commune for happy gatherings. Yeah. So it has this very complicated rhythmic drumming, very complicated footwork. When I was in university and I was studying this, I didn't like university, to be honest, but this is one of the few parts of university that I really enjoyed. Yeah, so Sengenya and such Mijikenda music. So I was trying to put that idea of that rhythm, but convert it to be more of a melody. Yeah. So I think that's how it came across in that different way. And even you remember when I gave you the program notes, I said the piano accompaniment should be thought of more as a percussion than a melodic accompaniment, because it's mostly accompanied by percussion. There's very little melodic accompaniment. Maybe only one instrument, actually. Maybe just a horn or a firimbi, what you'd call a whistle, I think. Firimbi, sort of similar instrument, yeah. Very little melodic, very little melodic accompaniment. Most of it is percussive, most of it is counter rhythms, polyrhythms. I don't want to call it complicated rhythms because it's just what it is, but it's really beautiful, really fun. When you finish this interview, please go look for it. It's just beautiful.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you for the recommendation. I mostly just thought it was hard because there's a million C sharps in it. And those are fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool.
I don't know. You recorded a first version and a second version. Yeah. When you recorded the first version, I liked it because of there's some nuances you're doing. There's some intonation. What do you call them? Like pitch bends you're doing on some of the notes. I don't know if it was intentional, but I really, really liked them because cool. the feeling of it should not be too stately, too polished. It should be sort of like an improvisation. Yeah, the feeling of it, because when you're improvising, you're not necessarily thinking about playing exactly the same rhythm, being, this sounds wrong, but being exactly in tune. You're thinking about the general feeling of it. Right. And that should be the idea behind it. Yeah, what's the word? What's the official classical education word for it? Is it free rhythm?
That works. We don't need an official word.
Yeah.
Cool. That's good to know. I know a lot of folks here have been interested in playing it themselves, so this will be really helpful information for them to hear you say.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm Njabulo Phungula. I'm based in Durban, in South Africa, and yeah, I'm a composer. So basically, how I came to music was when I was about 13 years old. I guess I started experimenting with, I guess, mostly electronic music on a computer and that sort of thing. Um, and I guess as time went on, I sort of became more and more ambitious. My parents bought me an upright piano sort of out of the blue because they realized I had an interest in music, and I wanted to learn more and more. And it went from being this hobby of mine to being my absolute passion. So yeah. And I guess up until the end of high school, I considered being a film composer, and that was kind of where I got most of my that's where most of my influences were. And I guess my early 20s, I sort of came to sort of more contemporary classical music, and that's kind of where I'm at now. Um, so I began studying composition at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. I did my undergrad there, where I studied composition with Jürgen Bräuninger, and my master's with Claire Loveday. And now I'm here.
Cool. And is that the piano behind you right now?
Yeah, that's my piano, which I've been preparing because I've been experimenting with prepared piano and that sort of thing recently. Yeah.
Can you talk about that? That's cool.
Yeah, so I'm not writing any specific piece for prepared piano, but I think during this pandemic, I've sort of been forced to play around with different ideas. I've been confined to this little space and hadn't prepared before. So yeah, when I think my dad made me run some errands a couple of days ago, which I had to do. And when I was at the hardware store, I saw some screws and I thought, okay, maybe this is an opportunity to do something. And so yeah, I bought a few things, which I don't know if you want a demonstration.
Yeah, sure.
So yeah, just a few weird sounds there.
Yeah.
Just generating some ideas.
And what are you discovering from that?
How to use the piano as a percussion instrument, I guess, and also just thinking of percussion in general, and how to create the sort of most unconventional sounds out of anything. I guess you can. This goes into extended techniques. I guess for all instruments you can do that, but it's just always a reminder to be curious about everything, and you'll see what you can find.
I feel like you might have taken that kind of attitude and that kind of approach to writing circles.
Yeah, I kind of did.
Big curiosity about what sounds are possible. Like I had a student play that piece because it was a handbook in bassoon extended techniques. I had to do every color imaginable in that piece. So can you talk about some of that experimentation and that like journey in writing circles?
Right. So I think Circles was my first piece for a solo instrument that isn't piano. And I guess it was kind of daunting because you tend to think of woodwind instruments as sort of single voice instruments because you can't really play multiple voices on an instrument at the same time. I guess we tend to think of them that way. And multiphonics are, of course, one way to do it. But I think writing the piece really forced me to explore extended techniques in a way I hadn't before. Because it's easy to find yourself thinking of the bassoon as this instrument with a single tone, but I had to sort of think about all the different ways in which I could create sounds. So that was a piece that was inspired by an essay by an American writer, Ralph Waldo Emerson, who wrote a piece called Circles, which discusses this idea of circles, metaphorical and otherwise. And I guess I tried to translate that idea into the piece, but not follow the model too closely because I didn't want it to feel like a sort of science experiment or anything of that sort. But that was the initial inspiration behind the piece. And so the structure of the piece, I guess, you can think of it as there being three sections. You can't really sort of distinguish the sections when you listen to it. but I think the first section has this, there's often this leap of a seventh, either a minor seventh or a major seventh that occasionally, you hear, and that's would be like the first gesture that represents the first circle. The second circle is sort of more erratic, I guess. It doesn't necessarily have any specific unifying motif or anything of that sort. And then the third circle is the shortest of them all, and it's you'll see if you listen to the piece or if you look at the score, there are a number of repeated phrases, sort of pseudo minimalist, that sort of thing, but there are a few of those. So I wouldn't say that they're contrasting in quality, but they do have their own distinguishing features. But I don't know if you can necessarily find the method to the madness if you listen to the piece, but it's what I was thinking about when I wrote it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think I definitely was catching the seventh motif. That's huge for me, because the bassoon, like, it's such a challenge to do leaps like that on the bassoon and make them convincing and make them melodic. So
apologies.
No, what a awesome challenge. And when it happens, it's so effective and it's so haunting, and that's why I like circles. It's so it's really haunting, and I think it comes from that seventh motive.
Right.
What drew you to that essay?
Nothing apart from just the possibility of translating the concept into music. I mean, I wasn't actively seeking out the essay. I think I came across it randomly. I think someone mentioned it at some point, and then I just sought the essay out and I read it. And it got me thinking about how to translate that idea into a piece of music. And so that's what happened.
Do you often work with like a different art form and then try to translate it? That seems like it's calling on your initial dream of film music, like looking at film and pulling from that for the music. Like, do you take from other art forms like that?
Yeah, all the time. I think the piece I finished before I started writing circles was an electronic piece called A Meditation on Maya, and that was influenced by the films of Maya Deren, who was an experimental filmmaker. And I think most of my pieces since have been influenced by literature, film, and yeah, things like that. So that's a very big thing for me, is finding inspiration everywhere. And because I love so many art forms, I think most of us do. But I do like to see what I can extract from other people's work outside of music.
That's so smart. And what are you working on now? Is there something we can look forward to seeing soon?
I'm not working on anything specific right now, but I did write a few weeks ago a piece called Passing the Hues for the soprano Stephanie Lemprea. It's a text setting of 2 poems by Walt Whitman. So she'll perform that on the 9th of August. And then I wrote a miniature piece as well for the Compass Ensemble who are based in Freiburg in Germany. And yeah, that performance will take place sometime this year as well. Yeah, so that's what I have coming up.
Cool. Looking forward to it.
Thank you.